Hi friends, I have an exciting feature of my gem, Hot Glue, to show you today. Today I'm going to go over the attachments feature, which will show you how to create a drag and drop attachment using Hot Glue, which sits on top of the Rails active storage system, which you'll also get a bit of a crash course in today. This feature is something that I had a vision for when I first conceived of Hot Glue several years ago, and I'm so pleased to have finished a very nice implementation that I'm very, very pleased with. First, a bit about active storage. Active storage is the storage mechanism built directly into Rails and is an excellent choice for storing assets. Assets are things like images, JPEGs, PNGs, WebP images, and other kinds of files like Word documents or PDFs. You can even use it to store videos, which is really cool. Okay, so what we're going to build today looks exactly like this. This is the finished product, and it's a simple images table that enables the user to drag and drop images right from their desktop onto a drop zone on the page. And it looks like this. I click New. I'm going to put, for the name, I'm going to put anything, an image, let's say. And I just happen to have some JPEGs here on my hard drive, so I like this one here. You drag it right over the drop zone here. It uploads it, and when I hit save, it creates a little thumbnail. That's the finished product. That's what we're going to build today, and we're going to build it in several different steps. It's very subtle but powerful, and let's get started right now. So before I get started, I'm going to come back into full screen here to give you a quick overview of active storage and what we're going to be looking at today. And active storage comes with a beautiful suite of implementation details that I'm going to give you a very broad overview of right now. And just keep these things in your mind as when you're going through your setup, and just have them as a visualization. We're going to not cover each of these in detail, but this is just a broad overview. Number one is a tool called VIPs or VIPS. That's what's going to be used to resize images automatically and create thumbnails of your image and upload it. You'll need to have VIPs installed on your system. As you will see, Rails has a specific syntax for how to declare your thumbnails in your images. Number two, using an external data source to store your assets. In our case, we use the relatively ubiquitous Amazon S3 storage service. As you will see, when images are uploaded and also resized to make the thumbnail, they get sent to your Amazon S3 bucket, which is where they will live. Using this, we can build what's called a 12-factor app, which means that we have an ephemeral file system, which that means we don't write to the disk, and all deployments are disposable. Now, that's a slight mischaracterization, because we do write to the disk, but we don't actually persist when we write to the disk, because everything gets stored in Amazon S3. The third thing I want to touch on quickly in this mini crash course for active storage is something that I won't really cover other than to mention it right now. Active storage serves files in two different ways, or in two different modes. It has what's called redirect mode, and it has also proxy mode. When we're displaying an asset to the front-end user, Rails will generate a URL that will be what the browser will see as the asset, as the URL for that asset. That URL is actually a URL that points back to the Rails server itself and a specific controller. Now, when Rails receives that request, it will either do the redirection or proxy, depending on which mode it's in. In redirection mode, the app will call up the Amazon S3 storage service to generate something called a signed URL. A signed URL is a URL that contains a special key that allows the user to download this image for only 5 minutes. That means that image can only be seen by that user for 5 minutes. Now, the user comes back and refreshes the page 6 minutes later, they'll get a new signed URL, so that new URL will be then good for another 5 minutes. The Rails does this in redirect mode by sending back to the client what's called a 301 HTTP response, or a 301 redirection response, and that will send this signed URL so the browser can then go request the image from S3 and download it within that 5-minute time frame. The other modality that Rails works in is called proxy mode. Now in proxy mode, on the other hand, Rails will fetch the asset from the bucket and serve it back to the client directly. It doesn't send back the redirect message and telling the client to go fetch the item from the bucket. I won't actually cover this, so if you learn more about that, be sure to see section 5 in the active storage overview, which is part of the Rails guides. The fourth thing to know about active storage with Amazon S3 is direct uploads. Direct uploading means that the client, when we're making an upload to our app, like I just showed you in the demo, I just imported an image, the client sends the file, that is the browser sends the file to Amazon S3 directly, bypassing having it go through the Rails app itself. So if we're not in direct uploads, the client sends the asset to Rails, and then Rails sends it to your S3 bucket. If we are in direct upload, the browser sends it directly up to the Amazon S3 bucket first. You're going to need direct uploads if you have large files. And these days, most people uploading files are going to have large files. I'd say if you have anything above 5 megabytes or 10 megabytes, you're probably going to want to implement direct uploads because you'll have a much smoother and better experience. However, I've bundled right into Hot Glue, and I'm going to show you today, a handy installer to make this very easy. And it requires that you use the direct flag on the Hot Glue setup, which I'm going to show you today. 5, in this mini crash course about active storage, is not part of active storage, but is an extension, and it's part of Hot Glue that I've built in, and it's called Drop Zone, or the Drop Zone support, and it's what enables the user to drag the file icon right from their desktop onto the browser window, which I showed you in the demo at the top of this video. I know that's a lot, so just keep those 5 ideas in your head for a moment before we get to the demo. And today I'm going to actually try to build this app and show you all these features in under 10 minutes, which is a little tricky. We'll see if I get there. There's quite a bulk of functionality written into this, but Hot Glue is optimized to get you up and running with all of this nearly instantaneously, which I'm going to show you right now. Okay, welcome back to the desktop view. You can see me here in this little window. To do this, to get started today, I'm going to set up my demo app for you using these things called quick scripts, which you can find on my website. These are just shell commands. They're not even shell commands. They're just things you're going to copy and paste into your terminal, and they're right here. All of them are just bundle add, git, commit, sed, and echo, and what they do is they install things, they set up files, all these scripts I wrote, and you're going to copy and paste them directly from my website, which I'm going to show you how to do in just a second. I know it feels like it's cheating to copy and paste, but keep 2 things in mind. This is as close to being boilerplate setup as you can get without actually being boilerplate. One thing that I have against boilerplate, that is the kind of boilerplate where you simply clone it from a GitHub repository, is that you're not really making the commits yourself. You're just downloading somebody else's prefab setup. So this is a prefab setup, and it's what is necessary for Hot Glue. To do all these steps yourself, you could do them yourself, but it takes a while. So just copying and pasting these scripts is much faster and much easier. They achieve the same thing as boilerplate. They're nearly as fast as boilerplate, but you have the advantage of making the actual git commits yourself without doing the typing. And so when you examine your git commit history, it'll actually be you who have made the commits. In this case, I'm just going to fly through this, copy sections 1 through 7. Now, in some of these sections, there's more than one choice. So always make sure that you choose only one of the code blocks in each section, with the exception of the devise section, which you should do both of. And the only thing, you can pretty much copy and paste exactly what you see, except the very first one, which has a special step just to set your app name. And I'm going to show that to you right now. So let's do that. This is for how to create an app using JS bundling, which I happen to prefer over import maps, but Hot Glue works fine with import maps if you want to use import maps. So here, when you paste this one, this is the very first one, remember, just note that I put your app name here right at the beginning where it says Rails New. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to instead call it, instead of calling it your app name here, I'm going to call it that's good. Okay, so that's it. And I just hit return. Oh, sorry, you can't see everything here. So I'll move this over here. Actually, let's do this. As it's running, you can see it's running. Now, that's just the first one. There's 7 of them that we're going to do. This is installing our spec and some testing gems. We don't actually need the next 2 for this demo, but I'm just going to put them in just for good measure because it makes it nice and clean. Some debugging help. This is just generating a default welcome controller, which Devise wants, but we're not actually going to even use Devise today. And here we get to the CSS options. I'm going to go with Bootstrap. So this first one is for Bootstrap. That adds CSS bundling Rails. And we need Kaminari for hot glue, so I'm going to add Kaminari here. And then finally, we actually get to the hot glue installer itself, which is this guy. And that's it. Now, if you'll scroll down on this page, you'll notice that section 9 is the active storage part. And this is the section that covers the setup of active storage itself. But I'm not going to copy and paste it today because instead we're going to go through step by step and we're going to do all the stuff in this section because that's what you're learning today. So that's the setup. That's all we did. After we set up, make sure you've migrated. I think the scripts actually do your migration for you, but make sure you've migrated. And you'll notice that everything's committed. So all the steps we just made, it just committed all these things. Committed them today, which is the day that I'm making this video, as you can see. Okay, ready? So let's dive in, and we're gonna now switch to the hot glue documentation, which you can get here. Hot glue for Rails. I recently did just move it to hot glue for Rails in an organization. So if you have the old links, make sure to update your links. It used to be at my personal GitHub account. So let's see. Okay, so before we get going here, remember we're going to do 6 iterations. And each of those iterations shows another facet of active storage and another facet of the feature set we're looking at. And I'm going to make a git commit between each iteration so that we can see what we've done. So everything we're doing today is here in the hot glue README, which is the main documentation. The only documentation for hot glue is this giant README file. And it's all here. If I search for attachments, not in my git commits because those are my recent commits. No, I actually want it down here where it says special features. So let's just go through it. Step 1 is setting up an images table, and we're going to use local storage, and we're not going to have any drop zone or any S3 uploads. Make sure to install VIPs. I already have it installed with Brew here, so it's probably going to tell me. It tells me that it has to update. Okay. It already tells me that it has installed, so I don't need to reinstall it. So you do need to add image processing, which is the name for active storage. Actually, active storage is built into Rails, and image processing is an image processing gem that active storage sits on top of. I recently learned. So we're going to add image processing. Then we're going to run the active storage installer. And that just copies the migration file, and we're going to actually migrate and see what it does. So just to note, when we have done, so if you take a look in your database now, you'll notice that the only tables in here are the active storage attachments, blobs, and variant records. This is just part of active storage. It adds these 3 tables here for you. We haven't even added any tables of our own yet. We've just installed that. So let's keep going. Now we're going to generate our table. So that's going to be Rails generate images name string. Here, I'll type it out for you. Rails generate model. Rails generate model. Pardon me. And you're going to in this case, I'm not going to put, let's put this orig file name string. So we're generating an images table. It has only one field in it, which is orig file name, and that's a string. And migrate our database. Okay. Now, moving along here, this is right in the instructions. Add to the image model. Open up this in RubyMine, which is my preferred editor. Okay, I got my project open, and this is just the default that we get with the default setup scripts. And let's see if we go into our models. There's our new image model. It's totally empty, and oh, that's not what I want. No, that's what I want. So here it says we're going to give it a default. We're going to give it an has one attached avatar, right? And that's the actual attachment. It's a active record model called image. It can be called anything you want. Oh, sorry, I should turn off the GitHub Copilot. So has one attached avatar. The thing that's attached to our image is going to be called an avatar. That's just what our attachment is called. I just called it avatar because it was a relatively unique word. And on this avatar, we're going to have one variant, which is going to be the thumbnail. And in this case, it's going to be called thumb. This is just the most standard setup. You don't need, if you want thumbnails, you do need to have the variant, but you don't need them. They are optional. And they can be called anything you want. You can call this anything you want, and you can call the thumbnail anything you want, and I'll show you how to use that with hot glue in just a second. So now let's generate our first hot glue scaffolding here. And I didn't call the string field name. I called it orig file name. You'll notice I'm doing something slightly different than what I have in my docs here. So here I'm saying to include orig file name and add attachments, add avatar, the avatar attachment. This is required over here. Attachments equals avatar, that's necessary. You actually don't need to put avatar in the include syntax, but I like to because you can use the layout features with it if you do that, but you must have the attachments. I'm just telling hot glue to generate an image scaffold. It happens to be using God mode, which means that it will not need authentication. It will have access to all records. And here we go. Okay, so I made a mistake here because I realized that my you need to have, hot glue requires that you need to have a label for all of the objects in your entity graph. So since I called the orig file name field orig file name, I need to actually just give this a name. So def to label. And I'm going to give this the orig file name label. Even though under the hood, it's actually called orig file name, this is just what hot glue needs to make it work. And if it doesn't find it, it'll tell you this. You need to have either name, label, full name, display name, email, or number directly on your objects. Let's try it again. Okay, so you'll notice that hot glue just generated a bunch of code. Here's the generated code. It's in views images. These are all of the view partials, the views and the partials. And then here's the controller, the images controller itself. And let's see what we got. Remember to start your server with bin dev. I go to 127. Hello world. And I'm actually going to go to the images route, but you know what? I don't think I put it in. I forgot to put it in. So that's the wrong routes. We're going to do resources, images. Okay, let's see what we get with bin dev. Just starting up our server. And we should get, oh, not you. So if we go to the images route, we should see the basic hot glue page. We can make a new image here. And we don't have drag and drop yet. And the original file name field I'm going to come back to. But I can choose a file from my hard drive using the dialog box. Let's choose daffodils. That looks nice. See if it works. Save. Okay. And you see it made the thumbnail. It made the thumbnail resized to limit 100, 100. That's what specifies the size of the thumbnail. So that's step one. Let me commit my changes here. Okay. Local disk. Okay, so step two is what if we didn't have the word thumb as our variant, but instead we had another word. It can be any word you want. You defined these, has one attached. So hot glue just wants to help you along in the process. Let's say you defined it to something that wasn't thumb. Hot glue, because we use the short form syntax, which is this one, this guy here, right? Attachments avatar. Hot glue assumed that you had a variant called thumb. But what if we didn't have a variant called? What if we had a variant called thumbnail? Now, when I change this, we're actually going to mess up the existing one we did. So just for good measure, I'm going to go in. We're not going to be able to see. It's going to tell me it's all broken because I changed it. Right. So just for good measure, let me delete that before we continue. And then now I'll change it to thumbnail. And how would we handle that with hot glue? So that's pretty easy with hot glue. All we need to do is regenerate the scaffold. And here we give it a special syntax, which I've outlined in the documentation. The long form syntax with one parameter. So here we're going to do, you could just write thumb. If you had it called thumb, you could do that. But if we have it called thumbnail, so that's the attachment specification with one parameter. Let's see what it does. Just say yes to overwrite these things. Okay. So now we called it thumbnail. In our view, we're actually not going to see anything different because it's going to look the same. JPEG, save, and that's the thumbnail. Okay, so that's step two, and it's showing you that you can use a customized variant name. Let me commit my changes here. Actually, you know what? I can use the RubyMine commit system. Okay, so step three is a special feature that I built into hot glue, and you can only use it with local storage. You can't actually use it with S3, so this only works if you have local storage. And that's if you happen to want to save the actual name of the original file. And you might have noticed that I prepared us for this by including the original file name in our database. So for that, we're going to put a second parameter, and that's going to do the pipe. So we have the first parameter. I'll expand this a little bit. First parameter is thumbnail, and then you do pipe, and then you do a ridge file name. And that just tells hot glue, use thumbnail as the thumbnail, and the second parameter is the field where we want to save the original file name. It doesn't have to be called a ridge file name. It could be called name, it could be called file name, it could be called anything you want. So now, and this actually doesn't make a whole ton of sense, what I've just done, because I have the ability to edit the original file name, which I actually don't want for this. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grab this long Midtown Manhattan New City skyline in winter and falling snow. So I hit open, and then I hit save. And you see it's taken the original file name, the JPEG name, and it's stuck it into that field. So this doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. I recommend, the reason it doesn't make a whole lot of sense the way I just did it is because the user can edit the original file name. So I recommend you actually, if you do this, you're going to want to put the orig file name on the show only list, which I'll do here. Regenerate. Now, let's see what we get. That just makes it so that when I'm looking at the thing, I can't actually edit it. Right? I can't actually edit this here. And when I'm inputting it, there's no place to input it anymore. It's just a field that I can't input. So that's step 3. It's called automatic file name pickup. Let me commit this. Okay, so step 4, we're now getting to Amazon S3 storage. Remember, we're not yet getting to direct uploads. This is the just using Amazon S3 as the external data store. So what are the steps to do that? And I myself have forgotten, so where did my windows go? So you kind of got to scroll down. I'll get to the second parameter. I'll get to the third parameter in a second. That's for direct uploads. For S3, we have a couple more setup steps to do, and these are important. So we're going to add another gem. Now you're going to have to go to config storage, which is here, and you're going to want to uncomment this block here. Mine. I want to uncomment this block here, and this has an annoying little facet where I have to do this to get the YAML spacing correctly. And the main thing that you need to know here is we're going to need to set our Rails credentials for the AWS access key ID and the AWS secret access key, and you're also going to need to set your bucket. So in this case, I have a bucket that I already set up called hot glue test, which I'll show you in just a second. And to edit the Rails credentials, we're going to use bin Rails credentials edit. Now it's actually going to tell me it can't do that because I need to specify the editor. Don't use mate, it doesn't work correctly. So use vim or Emacs. Bin Rails credentials edit. And here we go. So these are actually just the default credentials. Hit I in Vim to insert. And remember, your YAML has to have 2 spaces or else it gets very picky. So now we need to get your access key ID and your access key, secret access key from Amazon. You want to do that by going to Amazon, creating a new user in your IAM profile, giving that user the permissions to the S3 bucket that you want. You can give it full S3 access, or you can give it access just to the bucket that you were working with. And then at the very end, after you create the user, there's a place where you'll see it'll show you your access key ID, and it'll show you your secret just one time. So make sure to copy it that time that it shows it to you. And I'm not actually going to expose it in this, so let me pause the video, and I'll be right back, and I'll have set that as soon as I get back. Okay, so I set my Amazon credentials and I saved the file using Vim. One thing to note, it's a very important step that you don't miss, and this is in the active storage setup guide, which you should refer to, but is in Amazon S3, this is the bucket, and for hot glue test, it happens to have a couple images that I had done for testing purposes before. Make sure to go to the permissions tab and set the cores. And this is what I have for cores. I actually don't need, this is my other app here. So you just need to have for development, you just need to have 127.0.0. 1:3000. If you have another bucket for production, which I recommend, you're just going to set that to be the domain name. You probably want to put HTTPS as the allowed origins there. And you pretty much should just use exactly what this course policy is. And that policy is in the active storage in setup instructions. So now we've set cores and we've set our S3 credentials. Do we do everything? Oh yes. So go into development and production. I like to have dev prod parity. I really do. So when I'm setting up Amazon S3 active storage, I do it for development. I just use one bucket for development. I use a different bucket for production, and it saves me a lot of headache. You could have development in disk mode and production in S3 mode, but I don't really recommend that. So where is active storage? Okay, so this is active storage service local, and instead we're going to change that to Amazon, right? We don't need to do it for production because this is just a demo app, but if you were doing it for real, you would want to go into your production file, a production RB file. Okay, so that's all we should have to do for Amazon S3. And we're still on step 4 of our process here. Let's see what we get. Let's see if I did it all correctly. Now, because I switched from local to Amazon, oh look, the existing images do actually work. That's interesting. But yeah, I think that, I don't know why that works, but I think that works because it remembers which storage service it has used it for in the past. But anyway, for good measure, you probably just want to stick with one. And I typically just delete the assets when I switch between them because otherwise you might confuse it. So here, still the same thing. We're gonna just upload another image. This time, it's gonna upload it to Amazon S3. Now, let me show you what it looks like here on the bucket. These two files just happen to be here from some testing I was doing earlier. I'm just gonna delete them. Don't worry about it. So this is our empty bucket hot glue test on Amazon S3. If I hit save, you'll notice it works here. And if I refresh in transmit, which is my FTP viewer, you see these funky key-based file names that are very obscure. This is how active storage works. And if I look at the image, you can actually see that it is the image I just uploaded. Isn't that cool? That's the thumbnail. I think that's the thumbnail. That's the thumbnail version. So that's step 4 with Amazon S3 storage. In this mode, remember the browser is uploading the file to the Rails app, and the Rails app is sending it up to Amazon S3 where it lives. And it's also doing the resizing of it locally, and then it's sending that resized version, the thumbnail, up to the S3 storage service as well. Let me commit this. Remember, we've not yet implemented direct uploads, which is our next step. Okay, so that was step 4. And now let's do step 5, which is direct uploads. Now, direct uploads, let's see what it says here in the documents. Whoops. For direct upload support, you have to add active storage as if you're using JS bundling, you're going to do it this way. If you're using import map, there's a import map syntax that's on the active storage page. This is just for JS bundling or Webpack or Shaka Packer. Oh, right. I also need Sidekick. I forgot that I needed Sidekick. So let me just install that really quickly. Okay, so for just this particular step, because the direct upload processor and the thumbnail processor, the thing that processes it processes the direct uploads and the thumbnails, it needs Sidekick to run in a background job. You can use rescue or delayed job. I just prefer Sidekick myself because it's nice and fast and it's easy to set up. So I actually have a quick script for that. That's number 11 in my quick scripts. I'm just going to add that right now. Okay, now what else does it say? Okay, so, oh yes, now the hot glue itself comes up with a direct upload installer, which doesn't do too much, quite frankly, but it does. Yeah, so it adds to your application file, application.js file, it adds this. Basically, it just adds these two lines here. And now we're ready to, you have to regenerate your scaffolding in order to do direct uploads. So what was our last scaffolding that we generated? Well, hey, we can, if we don't remember what the last time we generated the scaffolding, you can actually go into the images controller, and right at the top of the file, it says regenerate this controller with, and this is the actual hot glue command we used last time. So I'm going to do direct, right? And that's the third parameter. See how it's one parameter is thumbnail, second parameter is rich file name, the third parameter is just the word direct, D-I-R-E-C-T. Now I think, yes. So unfortunately, the original file name extraction does not work when you're using direct uploads, so we actually can't support original file name extraction any longer. So I'm going to take away a rich file name. And in this case, if you don't want to use it, you have to leave it as empty string. So that means there's two pipes there, you'll notice. And I'm just going to take away the show only. It doesn't matter whether it's left in the layout. If it's like this, it'll still appear on the layout. It just won't actually, let's see if that works. It'll appear on the layout. It just won't actually grab the original file name as you're uploading it, which is what we're going to do right now. Yes, okay. And let's see if that works. Okay. Oh, you know what happened? I know what happened. We got a little bit of a layout problem, because one funny thing about hot glue is that if you have two, you're going to fix this problem by just putting a semicolon at the end of the include list. That will switch hot glue back into what's called specified grouping mode, and then our layout will go back to what it was before. Okay, so pardon me. Okay, so let's try it. Remember that in direct upload mode, the file goes directly from your computer to Amazon S3. And this is good for large files. I actually don't know which of these is very large, but let's say, oh, I can find out. That's pretty large. No, it's not. 32 kilobytes. 1 megabyte. There we go. That's a good one. Okay. Great. Okay, so it just did it. You'll notice we got all this log stuff here in which it told us all the stuff that it was doing, and it generated URL, and that's because it did that for creating the thumbnail, and that was a direct upload. So that's step 5. Okay. Okay, let me stop that. All right, and finally, the final step here is the drag and drop, the fancy drag over, and I'm going to show that to you right now. For drop zone support, we're going to add this node package, yarn add drop zone. Okay, and we already have stimulus, so we already have stimulus because it came by default with Rails, but you do need stimulus. So you need to run the hot glue drop zone install, which all this does is it copies a file. Oh yes, it copies a file, this file called drop zone controller, into your app. Into the JavaScripts here. Control. That's the drop zone controller. You can just read it if you want, but I'll show you what it does. You don't really need to pay too much attention to it, but you do need to rebuild your scaffolding. So the final rebuild of the scaffolding is that you put a fourth parameter. Remember, the second parameter is empty string, so it's just two pipes together. And the fourth parameter is drop zone, D-R-O-P-Z-O-N-E. For the third and fourth parameter, you either must omit them or you must, if you include them, the only option is direct and drop zone. That's it. If you don't write, like if I write something else here, XYZ, hot glue will tell me I'm not allowed to do that. So I actually don't want, this is wrong. It should tell me I should use drop zone. So what I want to do is not XYZ, but drop zone. It's the only option for the fourth parameter. Okay, please overwrite. Okay, let's take a look. New image. Okay, so now we have a big fancy place where we can drop our image. And that means that if I can go to my Finder window. Oh yes, this is a Robert Rauschen, famous artist from the 50s, the late 40s and early 50s, who was known for the art of assemblage. That's a good one. I drop it here, and it's doing both direct uploads to Amazon S3, and I just used I just dragged it right from here, right onto my window. Save. There you go. And there you have it. And that's it. That's step 6 to add drop zone support. Let me commit that. Not drop zone. Oh, you know what? I think I need to add unversioned files, which is the drop zone controller. Commit. Okay. There you go. And that's a wrap. So that's the end of the demo today. That's what we built. And I hope that what this has gotten across is that hot glue is designed to do all the heavy lifting for you. So it handles all of the nitty-gritty details with how the stuff works under the hood, and it takes care of all of that for you, so you can just focus on the meat and potatoes of your app, the actual things that you're building, the database, the data model, how the data relates to each other, and the interactions for your users. Uploading files is a very powerful feature. It has many applications, from content management systems to white labeling an app to profile pics or avatars, etc., etc. So thank you for watching today, and happy attaching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.